What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So this week we have Nintendo's next major event confirmed that I'm sure is going to have many people setting expectations very, very high, and we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a shocking announcement for Xbox with one game that Phil Spencer has been quizzed about constantly actually making a comeback, and we also have something to go over with the PlayStation 5, an announcement that has people thinking that Sony might be preparing for that PlayStation 5 Slim reveal. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below, and shout out to all the subscribers out there. We've now passed 700,000 subscribers, so I guess onward to 800,000. We're going to start today with Embracer Group. We know they've been having a bit of a hard time recently. Remember, there was that deal that was worth reportedly about $2 billion that fell through for them, and well, it had the CEO go on camera less than 24 hours later and didn't look too pleased about it. Well, now it appears that they are starting to carry out their plans to more or less slim down the company a bit. Remember, this is a company that's gathered tons and tons of studios and intellectual properties in a hurry. So we can see this posted up over on IGN, where they say Embracer Group is starting to close studios after losing out on deal worth billions. This studio being Campfire Cabal, that's been shut down, and this was found out through LinkedIn with the executive producer, Bruno Christian, who actually talked about all their employees at that studio being laid off and the studio being closed. And this is something that's probably going to be continuing for Embracer Group, as they had sort of discussed these plans before, and mostly saying, yes, we are going to consolidate down a bit in terms of the studios and what they're working on. Remember, they announced earlier this year they were at least developing more than 200 games. That seems like way too much for Embracer Group to handle, and when they lose a deal like that worth $2 billion, yeah, they start to look around and try to figure out which development projects they have going on that absolutely need the most attention and which ones they can cut out. So don't be surprised if we hear about more of their studios unfortunately closing down. Also, we had a really exciting announcement happen for Mortal Kombat 1, which seemed to coincide obviously with EVO and everything going on out there. But we have a new trailer, and yes, Reptile has been revealed, as well as a few other fighters with Ashra, Havoc, and a new cameo fighter, that being Serena. But Reptile looks awesome. They essentially have it so that Reptile is like a human form, but they can also turn into like the lizard form. And a bit of a backstory kind of being hinted at here, where Reptile mentions that ever since they were able to transform into their human state, that his people kind of banish him and look at him weird and like basically pushes back on them and stuff. So kind of an outcast here because they can turn into their human form, which that's kind of cool. It's good to have kind of this backstory to go along with Reptile that is discussed a bit more in depth, and the fact that they have basically two different versions of Reptile here that he'll be transforming between. It's kind of neat. So I like to see that Reptile is getting some shine here, and I know some of the other fighters people are excited about. For me, I really like seeing Reptile done right, and I think this could be one of the best iterations we've seen. Oh, and it appears we had a bit more information get out there for Starfield way of an early Amazon listing. And on this listing, which you can see here, does go over the preload date, that being August 9th, and you're probably going to want to take advantage of that, since apparently the space needed for this preload to download the game is 125 gigabytes. So probably not something you'll want to be downloading at midnight when the whole thing goes live in September. So in this case, August 9th, go ahead, start preloading that thing. I mean, everyone who has Game Pass, for the most part, I feel like is at least going to try Starfield. It's been hyped up like crazy, and based on what they've shown, looks massive. Looks very exciting for Bethesda fans, and I'll be playing that, of course, when it comes out, and yeah, I'll probably be preloading it here in a week or so to get ahead of that. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with a major event that's now been announced that Nintendo will be part of, obviously, and the focus for a game system would be the Switch, but we can see this posted up on Twitter. This from Pokemon. The next Pokemon Presents arrives soon. Trainers, tune in to our official YouTube channel at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern, of course, on August 8th for 35 minutes of Pokemon news and updates. And I mentioned before that expectations were through the roof for this thing, and it's expected. Pokemon is like the biggest brand ever, so Obviously, a lot of fans and people out there are going to be talking about what could be here. And I mean, just the tweet alone has over 10 million impressions. So you have a lot of people calling for things like the older titles, the Game Boy games, coming to Nintendo Switch. I've even seen people say all the Game Boy Advance games. Like, this should be the big announcement, is what people are saying. All these games going to NSO. And if that's the expectation, people are about to be massively let down. They could talk about NSO, but most likely it would be the Pokemon trading card game, maybe getting dated, or maybe just releasing right then and there. I would love to see the Game Boy games go to NSO. I think it'd be an awesome announcement. I think it would, in a way, reinvigorate some of those older games, right? I mean, obviously, you drop it on NSO and there's 130 million people who now have access potentially to it if they have NSO. And considering you'd have many Game Boy games that would go into that $20 a year service, yeah, there's probably a lot of people who maybe even take advantage of that online play and trading and stuff. I would go back and play Red or Blue. I think that'd be awesome. And who knows, maybe they even localize Green and drop that on there just for fun. Which I could see the announcement being, oh, we're going to sell these games on the eShop. I think that's possible, where they could sell all the different games, then throw maybe one from the different generations in NSO, a Game Boy game with Pokemon Yellow, then a Game Boy Advance game with Emerald or maybe Ruby or Sapphire or something there, right? So there's just too much money to be made for them to just instead go, oh, you can just have these games in NSO. Now, other things that people were trying to figure out, it appears that the M is specifically emphasized on kind of the fade in for the logo and fade out. So people are wanting Mystery Dungeon. Sure, I mean, we had one that was basically a port/remake of a previous Mystery Dungeon. Maybe this would be a brand new one. Maybe they could do other spin-off games. I think Pokemon Conquest, that would be cool to have a follow-up there, or just one specifically for the Switch. But most likely, I think we'll hear about things like the downloadable content coming up for Scarlet and Violet, probably stuff that has to do with maybe animated series, probably Pokemon trading card game stuff, and maybe a spin-off and then some mobile game stuff. That's really where my expectations are for this. I don't even know if we're going to hear about another big title for the Switch. Like, we've had rumors that there is a Legends Arceus style game, but set kind of in the universe with Black and White for those DS games. That would be really interesting, but I'm not necessarily holding my breath when they have a lot to talk about still to push with the DLC for Scarlet and Violet. But we'll find out in about 24 hours or so. Remember, this is happening tomorrow morning, and I'm sure we'll be going over all of that in Newswave following. Next up, let's talk about an announcement for Xbox that no one saw coming. This is for a game that Phil Spencer and Matt Booty have been asked about time and time again, and they've said, hey, we're trying, we just have to find the right people to work on Killer Instinct. Well, seems like they at least found someone to work on an update for the game. We can see this posted up on X, where it says, our friends Iron Galaxy, this is Killer Instincts, are back. And together, we're bringing you Killer Instinct's free 10th anniversary update later this year, including a balance update, improved matchmaking, and 4K support for Xbox Series X and S. More info coming soon. So, Iron Galaxy was working on Rumbleverse, and that got shut down earlier this year. They've also done projects over the last couple of years, including the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection, Metroid Prime Remastered, Last of Us Part 1. A lot of those working in more supporting roles, right? Like, oh, we need someone to do optimization for this platform or just run support. That's basically what they've been doing there. But Rumbleverse, I'm sure, took up a lot of their time. It was a live service game that spanned multiple platforms and is kind of that competitive game that had some fighting elements to it. But it being live service, you have to focus in on a roadmap and provide consistent content. That did shut down earlier this year, and at that point, I assume Iron Galaxy maybe became free, and they're familiar with Killer Instinct because they've worked on a couple of updates already. Remember, Killer Instinct, while it did launch next to the Xbox One in 2013, that originally was done by Double Helix. They were bought up by Amazon and then absorbed with one of their studios there, but after that, Season 2 and 3 were handled by Iron Galaxy. So them coming back is pretty cool. It's coming full circle, and this being on the 10th anniversary for the game might even let Microsoft gauge interest in Killer Instinct, whether they want to continue the current one as they are updating it for Xbox Series platforms, or maybe if they want to do another Killer Instinct and just have Iron Galaxy do the whole thing, like through a full contract, that they can keep them on board with it. The biggest mistake I would say Microsoft made at that time was to not just bring Double Helix in, whether they acquire them or continue contracting them out for Killer Instinct. Once Double Helix got away, it was kind of up in the air as if Killer Instinct would continue. But now Microsoft a bit more dead set on the gaming sector and willing to throw around money, as we're seeing. So maybe we can see Killer Instinct continue on from this, or maybe it's more of a one-off update for that 10th anniversary and finally bring it up to spec with the Xbox Series platform. But more information to come. We really don't know about when this update will happen and other parts of it, so I'll keep you guys posted on that as we learn more. Next up, let's talk about an interesting announcement for the PlayStation 5, one that has people thinking that Sony could be moving to announce that PlayStation 5 Slim or that detachable disk drive revision pretty soon, because the current disc-based PlayStation 5 is going on sale this week. In fact, it's starting today. We can see this posted up over on Target, and this has $50 off of the PlayStation 5, having it go from $500 to $450. I also saw that they have several games on sale, so you can pick up some physical copies maybe for the collection, or even the DualSense controller, that being down to $50. Maybe you want to get a second one, or you like some of the color options that they've released, but you don't want to pay necessarily the full price for the accessory. Now would be a good time to jump in and grab one. I did notice that like Marvel's Midnight Suns, which, I mean, it's a good game. It just... It didn't hit, obviously, like 2K was hoping, but that being $35, you see the Sonic Origins Plus collection down to $30, Gran Turismo 7's at $50, GTA 5 at $20, God of War Ragnarok at $50, so not huge discounts for some of these titles, but still, they are discounted and they are physical copies. The thing that was really catching people's attention was that PlayStation 5 disc-based system, as the all-digital version is not on sale. So the disc-based system at $450 being only $50 more, it kind of feels like Sony is trying to get those out, like push them out the door. Because the thing I notice is I don't see digital PlayStation 5s out there very often. Like in a store, I will come across the disc-based PS5, whether it's in stock online or just walking into a Target or a Best Buy, it kind of being behind glass. I've never seen a digital version in person at all. So in this case, yeah, it is possible that Sony is just kind of pushing out some of their last remaining stock on the PS5, because why else would you put it on sale considering the thing keeps selling as it is, right? They just announced 40 million have sold, and they're moving along, I'm sure, to a much larger shipped number here when their financials drop this week. So you feel like they might be preparing for that Slim model to come out in, honestly, if we're in August now, you feel like they would try to launch the thing in the next probably 45 to 60 days to have it out and ready to go for the holidays. So keep an eye out for that, but really it's not going to change much. So if you want to take advantage of this sale, I would recommend it at $450 for the PS5, especially ahead of the holidays when a lot of people, I'm sure, are going to be rushing out trying to pick up some of these game systems. Not a bad time to grab one. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Square Enix and their most recent fiscal year report. This would be for Q1 of the new fiscal year, as we're seeing a lot of these companies report with Capcom and Nintendo. We discussed theirs previously, but Square's was going to be interesting because it would include sales information from Final Fantasy 16. And they also gave us an indication around some of the development costs for this game, which we can see some of the charts here over on Install Base Forum. And the biggest thing to take away is, yes, their their quarter over quarter net sales, so from last year's Q1 to this year's Q1 and their fiscal year, it is up. But the operating income is down dramatically. It's 80% down, actually. And they do explain why, that being Square. They say net sales up year over year due to the launch of Final Fantasy 16 and other new titles, but operating income is down partly due to amortization of development costs. So what's happened here essentially is they've taken the development cost that they were gonna have to put on the books as expenses and just recorded it here completely. And I mean, you're kind of looking at this like, okay, what game somewhat recently probably cost a lot of money to make? Well, that'd be Final Fantasy 16, unless you think Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster cost a small fortune to develop. Now, 16, while Sony did give Square Enix money clearly, and they also gave them engineering and R&D and stuff, things to help them in the background, Square is still going to record the majority of the expenses and then record their revenue from maybe Sony and those deals separately. It's, I'm sure, tricks and different things their accountants are telling them to do to lessen how much money it looks like they're making and all of this. But bottom line, Square Enix is still operating in the black, as in they are making profit. It's just technically less than they made this time last year. And now, having recorded seemingly Final Fantasy 16's overall cost for development, well, they'll probably just go on and say, okay, and now Final Fantasy 16 is just making profit consistently going forward, because Square Enix's plan, I'm pretty sure, is that they're going to have this position next to the PS5 for years to come as a big, one, graphical showcase, but also just a game you should pick up next to your PS5, it being more action-based, and trying to appeal to a broader audience as a title to really stress and show off what your PS5 can do. So that's the big question now that Square has seemingly recorded this massive expense on the books for development, if they can really capitalize on the revenue generated for more of a long tail for sales and profit heavily down the road. So we'll see if we start getting more and more reports on maybe Final Fantasy 16 passing 5 million, then like 7 million, then eventually that coveted 10 million unit number. So we'll find out more as we go along, especially after its first holiday, which is quickly approaching at this point. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, did you buy Baldur's Gate 3? Okay, 10% says yes, I picked it up right away. 30% say no, I'm waiting to pick it up on the PS5, eventually the Xbox Series, or just when I can. And then 60% say no, I'm not interested. 40%, that's actually pretty good for a game that leans heavily into the Dungeons and Dragons setup. I mean, you're actually clicking and rolling a die in front of you to match up to see if you can overcome certain obstacles or events placed in front of you. And I'm not the biggest D&D person or Baldur's Gate or anything, but I picked it up. I gave it a shot. I was playing it, and it's just not a game necessarily that I think meshes well with me, but I'm still playing it, and I see the high quality nature of it, and I understand why people who are really into kind of the idea of having this massive world and this story that basically takes twists and turns all over the place depending on your decisions would enjoy it. So it is definitely a good game. It's just not one that I'm necessarily like absolutely into myself. But hey, pretty cool to see the success of it anyway, because if anything else, they basically called out other games where they said, hey, there's no microtransactions or anything. This is a complete game. You buy it, you own it, that's it. So I can appreciate that. And I mean, 800,000 concurrent players. We're gonna hear about a pretty big number for sales when they're ready to share it, especially since, oh yeah, there's still a PlayStation 5 release coming up, and there's gonna be an Xbox Series release coming up, and I wouldn't put it past them to try to get it on Nintendo's next generation system that at this point sounds like it's lining up for a holiday 2024 release. Maybe Baldur's Gate 3 can be there in that first year of launch. It has cross progression, so you buy it on a system and your character will just show up. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Gutter saying the Mega Man franchise could use a shot in the arm. They could just license it out to a developer who's dying to work with the IP. I immediately think back to Mega Man X first-person shooter concept by Amateur Studios. That was prime material, if you know what I mean. You know, I wouldn't mind at this point because Capcom has talked about they're trying to figure out what they can do with Mega Man now. It was easier during the NES, the Super NES, the PlayStation days, kind of PS2, but at that time, side-scrollers were much more accepted, especially with the length of Mega Man. It's not a very long game, right? So you're probably not going to get $70 for it. You're probably not going to look for $60. All right, Mega Man 11 was like a half-price game when it came out, sure. But I thought it was a pretty good game overall, right? Not my favorite Mega Man game, but definitely in there, and like I'd say the top half of releases. So I don't know, how do you figure out Mega Man now in, we'll say next year, 2024? Well, Mega Man Legends, that does provide a more story-driven experience that, yes, leans into the RPG elements, but there's more content there, I guess you could say. They could go first-person shooter. A lot of questions for Mega Man, but I would like to see Capcom continue to push forward with that franchise because I still think there's a lot of, believe it or not, untapped potential since it's always been, for a lot of people, this 2D platforming game. It can still be that, but what else can they get out of it now? Especially with RE Engine just doing everything? Why not? Let's see what Mega Man can do when it has RE Engine behind it. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talk about here today. Where's the big Pokemon Presents coming up? What are you expecting out of this? And do you think we will eventually see the Game Boy or Game Boy Advance Pokemon games show up on NSO? And then also, what about Sony slashing the price of the PS5 disc-based unit by $50? Is that slim announcement coming up here soon? And then Killer Instinct kind of back, getting an update? Do you think we're going to see more from this franchise, though, in the future? And do you think Microsoft will have more of a long-term deal with Iron Galaxy going forward? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.